With the Cardinals playing against the AAA team in Memphis on Monday night, it sure seems like Oliver Marmol just revealed his opening day lineup. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Monday, March 24th, 2025, as we are just a few days away now from Cardinal baseball opening up for the 2025 season on Thursday afternoon at Busch Stadium. Cardinals Twins coming your way as the Redbirds get things going. But the actual Redbirds were in action against the Cardinals on Monday night as St. Louis's roster took on the AAA Memphis roster down in Memphis on their way back to St. Louis following the spring training in Jupiter. And although the lineup Oliver Marmol put together for this matchup isn't really one that we had seen aligned this way in its entirety all spring long, it seems like now would be the time, if you were going to give a dry run for this alignment, that you'd break it out so everybody kind of knew what to expect when you did it again on Thursday against the Twins at Busch Stadium. So that's what we'll be talking about tonight on b-schaeff Daily, the lineup, what we really think of the way that it lines out. Does it have good balance to it? Who gets left out of the lineup, of course, I think is particularly noteworthy given, Victor Scott made the team, so we still have that little conundrum of 10 quality starting players for 9 spots. And Ollie Marmol's got to make a decision. It seems like, at least for opening day's purposes, he's made that decision, although this is just speculative and based on the reporting from reporters who were down there in Memphis tonight, as the lineup certainly looked like an opening day lineup. And then I believe it was Derek Gould reported that this is what Oliver Marmol is looking toward for Thursday. And the quote tweet from Derek was, "This is Oliver Marmol's current plan for Thursday's lineup." So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Cardinals have a lineup. Who does it involve? Who does it not involve? Do we think they went the right direction with it? Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We will be talking Cardinals baseball all season long on this channel. Cover the Cardinals for KMOV, for Sports Hub STL. If you're just now catching my podcast for the first time, hit that subscribe button. Whatever may come this Cardinals season, I do personally think it's going to be a very compelling season. I know some Cardinals fans I've seen say, I'm not really excited for the season. I couldn't disagree with that sentiment more. I am really eager to see exactly how all of this is going to play out, because there's a lot of different balls in the air, it feels like, for the Cardinals, and the roster news coming this weekend sort of gave us a little bit of clarity. But even still, the way that this is going to play out with all the players who are basically vying for the chance to be Cardinals long-term and part of the long-term plans for the organization, I think is actually really interesting. And there's a lot of talent on this team, too, to where the Cardinals could maybe be better than people think. So if you're interested in Cardinals content on a daily basis during the Cardinals season, now is a great time to jump in and subscribe. So with that out of the way, I would like to take a moment and thank Kevin Foley with Universal Windows Direct for presenting this episode of b-schaeff Daily, and let you know that for over 20 years, Universal Windows Direct has been upgrading homes across St. Louis. But if you want the best in the business, you need to talk to Kevin. With expert advice, unbeatable deals, and a passion for perfect windows, Kevin will help you find the perfect fit for your home. And right now, if you buy 2 windows, you'll get 2 windows free. Plus, ask him about special financing offers. They've got them. So don't wait. Call or text the number on your screen, and I'll read it to you now. 618-520-1234 today to schedule your free estimate, and you'll be saying, "I love my windows," with Kevin Foley from Universal Windows Direct. Again, the number to call or text, 618-520-1234. Anywhere in the greater St. Louis area, Kevin can help you out with Universal Windows Direct. Cardinals fan, listener of the podcast, you'd be supporting Kevin, you'd be supporting b-schaeff Daily, and getting your new windows if you're in the market for that. So appreciate Kevin for presenting this episode of the podcast. All right, without further ado, let's talk about this lineup. I like it. I think it's the names that probably ought to be in it. If I were writing it, or there may be a few different tweaks I might make, perhaps. But it does seem like this is going to be the opening day lineup. Again, Derek Gould tweeted it out, was covering the Cardinals v. Redbirds game in Memphis. I believe Arenado hit a home run in his first at-bat, and then saw that he didn't play again in the rest of the game. This was another one of those games that was not on television, and it was just a radio-only broadcast, from what I understand. And the box score is not even available on MLB.com, so I can't even go through it and tell you exactly what all went down. I did see a tweet that the bullpen catcher was going to take it at bat, so that was kind of fun. Just an exhibition game, so there are a few different things that you can do to make it exciting for the players and for the fans. But what the fans in attendance did get, I do believe, as we said, based on the way it was reported by Derek Gould, is I think they did get a glimpse into the Cardinals opening day lineup. So let's break it down, starting with a change at the top. Masyn Winn, not your leadoff hitter for the Cardinals in Memphis tonight, and I don't think he'll be the leadoff hitter on Thursday. In fact, he ended up on the very other end of the lineup, batting ninth, which that part was actually not a surprise to me. I was sort of under the assumption that if Winn wasn't the leadoff hitter, if they dropped him down, it would probably be to the 9-hole. And the way they arranged the leadoff spot is with Lars Nootbaar, who is the left fielder, which shouldn't be a surprise either because we know Victor Scott II is going to be the everyday center fielder. Then the 2-hole also sees a change. Willson Contreras moving from number 3 to number 2 with a left-handed batter at the leadoff spot instead of Masyn Winn, the righty. You're trying to keep the right-left-right, or in this case, the left-right alignment. And so Contreras goes up from 3 to 2. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that, but I'm not surprised they're doing it. Again, to kind of keep that balance to the lineup. And the reason for it, and I know that there's been a lot of conversation surrounding this strategy, but the reason you do that is to not make yourself susceptible to the splits when you get especially late into the game and they can bring in a relief pitcher and essentially try to mow through a section of the lineup if there's too many righties in a row or lefties in a row. And by splitting them up, that's the most effective way to avoid that situation. That's the theory behind it. Oliver Marmol has done it. Not surprised to see it. Personally, I look at guys like Nootbaar and Brendan Donovan and say they're not overly splitty over the course of their careers. They're not substantially worse against lefties. I think last year was a little different. Nootbaar, I think, was a little bit lesser against lefties last year for sure. But for that reason, I kind of like the idea of Donovan Nootbaar at the top, which is something they tried a couple of years ago. We haven't seen it maybe much since then. But nevertheless, they're going to go Nootbaar, Contreras, and then Donovan slides in at number 3. Not really your prototypical number 3 hitter where you feel like that involves a lot of power, but that's what they're going with. And we'll see, time will tell. Like I said, I feel like Donovan more of a table setter than a guy to be cashing in an RBI producing spot. But with Contreras, too, he's also liable to be producing the RBIs from there. And it kind of is one of those deals that I think we can overthink at times and say, well, Donovan's not a power hitter. How could he bat third? He's a good hitter. He's a good contact hitter. He's a good player. He's going to hopefully have, an OPS in the high 700s or better. I think that's what he is for his career, like 770 something, and was in the 750s last year, and what was maybe a little bit of a down year offensively. But still one of the better hitters in the lineup, so he's batting earlier in the game. I don't really have any problem with that. Like I said, I think you maybe set the table more with the 2 lefties and then go Contreras, but to keep the balance to the lineup, they're doing it this way, and I'm not super surprised by it. Arenado batting cleanup, not a surprise. So very good balance there with a lefty-righty start. And they do have a lefty in the 5-hole. It's a designated hitter, and it's not Nolan Gorman. It's Alec Burleson batting 5th tonight for the Cardinals. And again, we are assuming, based on the way that it was framed, and I saw it reported by Gould, so I'll continue to credit him, that it's Ollie's plan for Thursday's lineup. And it sure looks like it, even without hearing that this looks like an opening day type of lineup. But it's Alec Burleson that gets the nod at DH over Gorman, and then Ivan Herrera is batting 6th, Jordan Walker 7th. That's the first and only instance where you have 2 righties back-to-back, and it's 5 righties, 4 lefties in the lineup. So that's the only way, eventually you're gonna have that stack, and it ends up being at the 6-7 turn with Herrera and Walker. Victor Scott 8th and Masyn Winn batting 9th is your Cardinals lineup from Monday, and I presume it's going to be, I don't know if I said Wednesday earlier, but it was from Monday, and I assume that's what you'll also see on Thursday, barring the unforeseen. So Cardinals fans, what do we think about this alignment and the way that it breaks down? I'm thinking it's pretty solid, and I posed this to Twitter after we saw the lineup and asked how many of these 9 players do Cardinals fans predict are going to have an OPS plus greater than 100. An OPS plus of 100 is league average. If you go on Baseball Reference, and you can see right next to all the stats, one of them in the columns or in the rows is OPS plus. And it's just a quick and dirty way to measure what a good value is for a player offensively. What's his production? And there's a lot of different numbers out there. Wins above replacement, that incorporates defense as well into the calculation. OPS plus is a way to normalize across a league average of 100 what an OPS is effectively. And it considers ballpark factors and a few other things. But I say quick and dirty because it's like I don't need a bunch of different numbers. I feel like that one encompasses a lot of things that are valuable and can tell you relative to the rest of the league what a guy's doing. Last year, believe it or not, of these 9 players, and so the answers were across the board when I asked the question, over 100 for like how many of these guys basically are going to be better than league average hitters this year. And even though I do feel like there's a lot of pessimism about the team, and I started the win total polls on Twitter. I'm at b-schaefer12 on Twitter, so you can go vote in those. We'll continue to do these win total polls until the collection of voters, presumably Cardinals fans voting on these, if 50% or more vote on under, I stop the polls. Until then, I continue to increase the win total by 1 until we get to that point. I started at 71.5 and have worked my way up. I think I just released either 73 or 74.5, and still it's like 80% voting over. So I say Cardinals fans aren't confident, but then when I ask them to vote in a poll, they're confident at least for a win total in the mid-70s, and I know that's not saying much, so we'll see if that confidence continues as we march it toward 500 and above. But my point is, like, there does seem to be a lot of understandable pessimism among Cardinals fans about what the season could be, and then when I look at it and say how many of these hitters of the 9 in the projected opening day lineup are going to be better than league average, people are like, 7. Some of them said all 9. Some said 6. A few said, 4. And I feel like that's maybe even selling it a little bit short. But would you believe that of the 9, 7 of the 9 were above average last year for the Cardinals? Nootbaar, Contreras, Donovan, Arenado, Burleson, Ivan Herrera, and Mason Wynn was just a touch above average. Walker and Victor Scott were the 2 from this group that were below. Granted, a number of those guys were between like 101 and 104, 105, so they're kind of on that cut line. But I thought I would go through tonight and sort of rank my expectations, and I need to grab a pen for this exercise so that I can, or type it down, one of the two. I think I feel better about it actually doing it on pen and paper, writing my predictions down. The problem is then I won't have it stored anywhere digitally, and it'll be on a scrap of paper, and I won't be able to find it later when I need to reference it, but that's okay. The digital copy can end up being very valuable. But as we go through this, I want to rank 1 through 9. My predictions for, and this is just a stat that I like because rather than argue about batting average or whether it's on-base percentage or slug, home runs, what matters, OPS plus. I feel like it does a nice job if I'm going to pick one stat and rank it relative to what the rest of the league is doing. That's the stat I'm going to pick. So let me go 1 through 9, and I'm going to try to decide how many of these guys I actually think will be above league average this year. And I'm ranking it, so I'm going to try to go in order. Starting with the player that I think will be the best Cardinals hitter this year, and it shouldn't be too much of a surprise because he's been the best Cardinals hitter for the past 2 seasons. It's Wilson Contreras, I believe, will be the most impactful Cardinal hitter once again. And if you look back at the last 2 years, his numbers, he's got let me see here. 826 was his OPS in 2023. Last year it was 848. So, 848 would be, you'd certainly take that from Contreras. Will he be higher than 848 now that he doesn't have to worry about the catching duties? He can just focus more on hitting. Granted, he's also learning a new position at the same time. But this notion of Contreras moving to first base sort of opens up the possibility that he can devote more of his energy and his time and his resources toward hitting and just being a true force in the lineup, which he's been. But last year it was only over the course of a 358 plate appearance sample size. He only played 84 games due to the couple of injuries he had. Now, one came at the plate, freak injury, got hit by a pitch. One came behind the plate, catching. JD Martinez breaks his arm. That one's avoidable because he's not going to be behind the plate this year. The other one, break injury when you're batting. Sometimes things happen. The OPS plus for Wilson Contreras last year was 136. So he was 36% above league average is what that means. This year, and it'll be a little bit tricky because if I say he's going to have a higher or lower OPS, that doesn't automatically mean the OPS plus will change accordingly, because what if the rest of the league does better or worse this year? So just understanding that it's a very inexact science. I'm just kind of basically doing this off of vibes here. But understanding all of that, I'm going to guess the OPS first and then just try to pick a number that feels like it'll be about the range for OPS plus. If he had an 848 OPS last year, his career average is 814 for OPS. With the Cardinals, it's been 835. I'm going to say he doesn't increase from the 848 because that would be quite the accomplishment. 848 is the highest OPS he's had since 2019 with the Cubs, and he was an all-star that year. But I think he can be around 830, 840 again, so I'm going to put it right at his Cardinals average of 830. Give me 836 for the OPS for Wilson Contreras, which means for OPS plus, let's give it, again, inexact science, but let's say it goes down a little bit from last year. We'll go 130. So I think he's a Cardinal that I would say locked in to be above league average, above 100 for OPS plus. The Cardinal hitter in which I am the second most confident when it comes to OPS and OPS plus, I think this year is going to be Lars Nootbaar, and he's the leadoff man, and I'm going to say he's the second Cardinal to end up with an OPS plus greater than 100. And you can be doing this at home. I want to hear from Cardinals fans. What's your number? How many Cardinals from this group of 9 get to that 101 on OPS plus? Are they above league average? For Contreras, the projections, the Baseball Reference projections, only had him down at an 804 OPS. I say he beats that. Let's do it for Nootbaar now. He's got an 861 OPS for spring. He had 14 walks to 12 strikeouts. More walks than strikeouts, which is not something that Newt has done in a big league season, but when guys do that, it does happen. It's an accomplishment. Nootbaar's never had a season in which he struck out 100 times. Now, granted, if he plays more games this year than the 117 he played in 2023 or the 190 he played last year, that's going to happen. He's going to strike out 100 times. But he's also been, and for the people who go, why is everybody always talking about Nootbaar like he's, and again, Brendan's got him second best on the team in his projections for this year. Why is everybody so gung-ho for Nootbaar? It's because his numbers are consistently really good. And like it may not feel that way if you're just looking at home runs and RBIs, and that's all you look at, but you got to expand your horizons, is my advice as a baseball fan. Expand it beyond batting average or home run RBI, because home run RBI are only going to also gauge how many games did you play. And fair, like that matters. It certainly matters, but also I'm looking more at the ratios of on base and slug, which is what OPS is, combine the two. You get on base, do you hit for some power? If you have a good OPS, it means you're doing one of the other or you're doing both to some extent. His OPS plus year over year in 4 big league seasons, and the first one was just a partial of a partial, and then 3 more full seasons, but still not a full one to his ledger. But his OPS pluses were 103, 124, 114, 111. That's a career of 115 OPS plus, which is 15% above league average. That's a really solid player, really good player. And I actually think we see Nootbaar maybe flirt with an 800 OPS this year. I'm going to say he doesn't get it, but let's give him, he was 758 last year. He was 788 in 22, 784 in 2023. I think he can be a 780. Let's give him 781. And that still feels like it might not be enough. But I'm going to go 781, which is going to be right around that career norm. He's a 774 for his career. I'll give it 114 OPS plus again. And that might not even be enough. I'm going to need to increase that. Let's go 789. 789 for the OPS, and then for the OPS plus, I'll give Nootbaar. Yeah, because 114 was a bit of a miscalculation. I'm already messing this up. More like 124 for the OPS plus, which is almost identical to what it was in 2022. In 2022, you'll remember he started the season really low in batting average and really didn't end it very high in batting average. It might have even been sent down there for a spell, but he hit 228. But he had an on-base of 340. He was drawing a ton of walks relative to plate appearances, only 71 strikeouts, 51 walks, and hit for some power, 14 home runs in 347 plate appearances. So that's about a 25 homer pace if he plays a full year. So there we go. We'll put Nootbaar at 124 OPS plus. We got Contreras at 130. Those are the two guys I'm probably most confident in the lineup, exceeding that number. Okay, let's move on now. And it does get a little trickier. And again, I'm not saying the Cardinals have a bunch of guys that are just going to soar past this number, but I think they've got enough guys who are going to beat it. Above average. And if you could be above average 1 through 9, you probably have a pretty darn good lineup. I struggle with the next one being either Brendan Donovan, Ivan Herrera, Burleson. I think I might go on the limb and say it's going to be Herrera, but that might be asking a bit of him. He was an 800 OPS last year, though, which would have been 124. He's also a 114 for his career. I'm going to say that Herrera just edges out what Brendan Donovan ends up being for OPS plus. I'll give Herrera, I'll give him a 780. I gave Newt a 789. I'll give Herrera a 780, which I say is going to end up being an OPS plus of 120. Again, 20% above league average. I'm expecting a decent bit out of Ivan Herrera offensively. The question is going to be, does he play with the regularity that he would if the defense weren't part of the conversation? Because he's going to have to continue to be consistent with the throwing arm, the management of the pitching staff. Pedro Pajes is sitting there and is somebody that is really trusted in those areas, so we'll see. But I have high hopes for what Herrera could do at the plate for the Cardinals this season, and I think the team does as well. By the way, his OPS in spring was over 1,000. I think he's a sneaky guy to pick up in fantasy baseball because what if he's just a stud? The dude loves to hit, and he's really good at it, so you never know. All right, after that, I would say I'm a little bit more confident in Donovan than I am, Arenado, and I think even in Burleson. It'll need to be a little bit of a bounce back year for OPS for Donovan, potentially to be in that spot, but I think it's well within range. A quieter spring, though, compared to some of the other guys that I'm higher on here. But he was a 112 OPS plus last year when he had a 759 OPS. Brendan Donovan's a career 771 OPS. I'll plop him right at 768, we'll say, for the OPS this year, which, just doing some math, let's say ends up being closer to like a 113. We'll go with 113 for Donovan. Again, that's 4 that I've got 10% above league average or better. Tell me in the comments that I'm being way too lofty with these expectations, but I don't think so. All right, let's look at Burleson next. I've got Burleson as my number 5. Again, we're ranking the lineup in terms of what I believe the production could be this year. And in some areas, I'm not straying too far from what like the projections are. In this case, a 728 is the projection according to Baseball Reference for the OPS of Burleson. Last year, it was a 735. He's only a career 709. OPS plus of 104 last year. He's a career 95 OPS plus. Over almost 1,000 plate appearances. So, like, this is an important year for Burleson. And the fact that I've got him slotted in here as a guy who's going to be, handily above is a little bit interesting because, again, he's a 95 for his career. But he was a 104 last year in a full season. First time we've really seen him in a full season. And I think he can actually tick up from that ever so slightly. He had a 735 OPS. I'll give Burleson this year, I'll give him a 739. I'm going to say he's a touch below 740. But right in that range. Give him 740. That's what he's had for the spring, right on the dot. I changed my mind. We'll go 740 for Burley, which let's say is going to be a 107. I don't know. 107 OPS plus. That's a 5th Cardinal that's going to be higher. What's interesting because do I think Arenado is going to be higher than a 7? I mean, I really could end up being a little bit overly just a big believer in some of these guys, but I feel like on paper when I say this out, I'm trusting Burleson to have a slightly higher number than Arenado. But if Arenado locks it in like he's capable, he should blow this out of the water. Projections are actually higher for Arenado according to Baseball Reference, 764. Last year, though, Arenado was a 719. Year before, a 774. And he's kind of an interesting wild card in this. Who has the higher OPS this year, Cardinals fans, Burleson or Arenado? Because I thought my answer was Burleson, but as I get to talking about it, do I think Arenado is going to be sub 740? Not really. Not really, man. Something else about Arenado, too. He's another guy that just doesn't strike out a ton. He had 92 strikeouts last year in 635 plate appearances. That's kind of remarkable because it doesn't, I was going to say it doesn't feel like he had a great year, and he didn't have a great year. But it was really just the power that was sapped. His average wasn't too far below norm. His on-base was just a touch below norm, and the power is what was really gone from him. But he was still taking the same types of plate appearances. I don't know. It's something tells me, man, whether it was he was kind of dealing with the back or was just trying too much with the swing changes, whatever the case might have been, I'm actually more inclined to buy back into him a little bit. And the OPS plus last year was 101. So he still beat league average last year. I'm changing my mind. Give me 755 for Arenado on the OPS, which if he gets it, it's going to be more like a 110 OPS plus or so. Depending, like I said, depends on the league, though, because in 2023, he was a 108 OPS plus, but his OPS was 774. So I think it's trending a little bit more toward pitching being the winners. And so those OPS pluses, the league average is going to go down. So relative to what your old OPS was and your OPS plus was, it probably looks a little bit better on OPS plus in 2025, even if it's with a lower OPS, if pitchers continue to dominate more as they did last year. So I'm switching it. I do think Arenado has a better OPS than Burleson, but I think both will be a little bit above 100. So that's 6. And those are the 6 that I'm probably the most confident in. And then we got to see. With Walker, Scott, and Wynn, I think we got to see. Walker would be 7th on my list. Next up there after Burleson, which I said Burleson is actually 6th. Arenado's 5th. I changed that as I just started to talk through it more. Jordan Walker, man, is an interesting case. Take a look at this, and we'll try to get out of here real quick. I love breaking down lineups, but it's kind of taken a while. Okay. He was a 787 OPS in 2023, which was 113. That was a 13% above league average. Last year, Jordan Walker was a 71 OPS plus. Means he was 29% below league average because his OPS was 619. Somewhere in the middle is where I think he could land. His career OPS is 740, which is a career OPS plus of 101. I'm going to say he's at 7. Give me 735 for Walker this year. But I think that does end up being like about a 102. Again, because I feel like the league average has changed. Actually, it might be closer to like a 105 OPS plus. So that would be a stark difference, though, compared to last year when he was a 71. But we haven't seen a ton of signs maybe of it in spring. And that's where I'll just circle Walker big. I'm refusing to give up on him. And I think even if he struggles this year, it's too early because he's just 22 years old and turned 23 till May. But that's the one where I might be a little bit lofty in my projection. And then Mason Wynn was actually last year above 100 as well. The only two that weren't in the lineup last year were Walker and Scott. But Mason Wynn, this will be interesting. If I'm too low on Mason Wynn, it ends up being a pretty good Cardinal lineup, I think. Because he was 102 OPS plus last year, and I'm not sure he has better numbers this year than the 730 OPS that he had. I'll go 725 on the OPS, but I'll say that ends up being like a 99 or right at 100. I just think he's hitting 080 for the spring. He's striking out a bunch. dealing with the wrist. I think it could be a little bit of a slow start for him. I think he rounds it into form for sure. It basically ends up being a league average contributor offensively. And then if he can add some stolen bases to it, had 11 last year, you'd love to see him steal 20 bags. A little more comfortable in the league. I think that's more than fine, especially if you're not trying to force him into the leadoff spot, which I don't think he needs to be until he has the higher on-base percentage. I think it's reasonable to have him lower in the lineup. And same thing with Victor Scott. Like, I get the idea where it might be nice to do, but I'm just not sure you need to force it. Victor's the one that's probably the toughest to project from this lineup because he's got an 1,172 OPS in spring. 4 homers, 5 steals. I mean, he's been a fantasy baseball dream, hasn't he? But last year, he had a 502 OPS in St. Louis, hitting 179. And even in Memphis, he hit 210 with a sub-600 OPS. So it's just kind of tricky to figure somewhere in the middle, right? I'm going to say he can crack 700 on an OPS. Give me like 704 OPS. But I still think even that might be lofty, but it also might be low by 100 points. And if it is, Victor Scott he's played too much to qualify for Rookie of the Year, or has he? Now, wait a minute. He's only got 145 at bats. But it may be based on games or service time that it doesn't qualify. Yeah, it's 45 days on an active roster, which he certainly had at least those because he played in 50-something games. So Scott won't have rookie eligibility, doesn't appear. But nevertheless, I think he ends up being somebody that, look, man, if he plays like he's played in spring and this is real and it's not a mirage, I'm more off on Victor Scott II than I am anybody in this lineup by saying he's going to be about a 700 OPS. He could be 800 and be truly that dynamic 5-tool player that is just doing it all for the Cardinals. If that's the case, again, we're too low on this team. But again, that has to be proven, right? He had a 500 OPS last year, not 800, not 700, not 600. He's got some variance to him where he could be a 650 OPS and be vastly improved from last year and be very, very playable every day in center field with his defense. Or he could be a guy who's legitimately one of the better hitters on the team and he's taken that leap. It wouldn't be a step, it'd be a leap at this point. But for now, since I feel like I've been above expectation on everybody else, I'm going to try to at least keep my expectations for Vic in check, and I'll say 95 OPS plus with a 704 OPS. But my point with all this is to say, and let me know where I'm wrong. If I'm wrong on somebody, who am I the most wrong on? I might be wrong on Newt. Instead of 789, he doesn't break out. He's more of a 750, 740 OPS. He kind of regresses some, but guess what? That'll still be above league average, if he does that. Maybe I'm too high on Herrera, 780 OPS, but he was an 800 last year and was raking in spring, so we'll see. Donovan, yeah, maybe he's not a 768. Maybe he's more of a 740, 750, and he continues to backslide a little bit like he did last year in OPS. Burleson, yeah, easily could be too high on him. He's a career 95 OPS plus in 1,000 plate appearances. So maybe he's more of a 720 OPS. Sure, that could be very much the case. Maybe Arenado doesn't bounce back. Maybe he's the same, but he was still league average last year. Maybe Gorman just doesn't bounce back. Gorman wasn't in this at all. And I don't have to project him, but I would not project 100. I would project below. Right now, I just struggle to see it really coming together for Gorman this year, just because when you're adding in a playing time concern just right off the jump, it makes it more difficult, I feel like. So I'm skeptical at this point on him, but I'm rooting for him to prove me wrong. But if I'm going to be a little bit pessimistic somewhere, that would be the spot maybe for me now. And look, Walker had much lesser than a 735 OPS last year, but he was 787 2 years ago. So to think that it's possible to get him to 735, I just don't think I'm too lofty. And yet I'm telling you, I've got basically 8 of the 9 at league average or above, and the other one is going to be right there at 700 OPS. If that's the Cardinals lineup, man, they're going to have a hard time not being at least in like the top half of runs scored in baseball, because that'd be a really, really sturdy lineup. Now, injuries can happen. What's the depth look like? That's fair to question. Although I think Gorman would be the guy that would step right in and give him playing time, and he may be able to put it together. You never know. Again, I still am a little bit skeptical. Time's going to tell. But what are your thoughts, Cardinals fans, on this lineup as we've gone through and ranked it? We think it's the open day lineup. It sure looks like it. And now we're going to really be able to get into the nitty-gritty on what's going to happen with this season because we're finally going to get to see some gosh darn games. So let me know what you think about it, where you're at with the Cardinals offense. It's been a very offense-heavy show. Not a lot to say about the pitching, but we'll continue to break things down as we go along here on b-schaeff Daily. Thank you guys so much for listening. Remember, call or text that number on the screen for Kevin with Universal Windows Direct if you are in the market for windows for your home in the greater St. Louis area. That number again is 618-520-1234. Call or text today to schedule your free estimate. Appreciate you guys as always, and we'll talk to you next time on b-schaeff Daily. Peace.